Hi everybody, it's Kit and welcome to another educational video by the Entropy System. With the appearance of Dr. Mann in our system, we've had a lot of questions coming in basically saying, wait, how can this happen? Because the general understanding is that alters in a DID system form as the result of childhood trauma. So how could Dr. Mann appear when we are A, no longer a child, and B, not going through trauma currently? So today we're going to get a little scientific to explain to you how all of this works, at least as far as our current understanding in all the modern research about dissociation and where all that's at right now. The thing we're going to be talking about is called structural dissociation. There will be a lot of vocab that I'm throwing at you, so I'll have that highlighted on the bottom so you don't get lost. And as usual, all of our sources will be linked in the description if you want to do some further research on your own. The core idea in the theory of structural dissociation is that when a human being is a child, they do not have a unified personality. They are born with a bunch of ego states that are sort of free-flowing, and each one takes its own role as a part of the child's survival. So one of them might be in charge of exploring the outer world. One of them might be in charge of making sure they eat enough. One might be in charge of becoming attached to an external caregiver, and so on and so forth. And there are just these little bubbly ego states that switch around in this baby's head and then the young child's head, and then around the age 6, sometimes up to age 9, the ego states connect and form one unified personality. And once that happens, it is impossible to form DID. It has to happen before that cementation process occurs. What happens with DID is that repeated severe trauma makes it so these little ego states have basically conflicting interests. So one ego state might see caregiver as the source of food. The other ego state sees caregiver as the source of danger. And so these two contrasting ideas cannot integrate together, and so they stay separate. These separated ego states, these disconnected parts of self, can get categorized into two different categories. One is called an ANP, which stands for apparently normal part. These are parts of self that do not hold trauma. So like me or like Daniel do not hold trauma. We are apparently normal parts. ANPs are the ones who are put in charge of outside living. So school and social life and work and rest and eating and, all those parts that every person needs to fulfill in order to live healthy and happy. Then there are emotional parts, or EPs. EPs are the parts of self that do hold trauma. EPs can be more one-dimensional than ANPs. Some emotional parts are stuck back in the trauma, and their personality and their traits don't really exist beyond the trauma. So in our system, Todd and Karen are both very solid examples of less dimensional EPs. So both Karen and Todd have the majority of their personality centered around the trauma that they experienced. They don't really have likes, dislikes, ambitions, stuff like that exist outside of the direct response to trauma memory. Wynn could probably be classified as an EP. She does hold a good amount of trauma, but she is a very three-dimensional EP. She was our one and only host for a very long time, after all. She has tons of traits about her personality that exist beyond the trauma, but she does have moments where she reacts solely out of trauma response rather than rational response like Daniel or I would. Not that we're always rational, but there's a difference between someone saying, hey, I need you to be home at 3, and hearing, okay, he wants me to be home at 3, and oh my God, if I'm not home at 3, he's gonna be so mad at me, he'll leave me, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So Wynn is she's got some EP about her. Now, most of you viewers at home, if something super traumatic happens to you, which I definitely hope it never does, but if it does, a little EP might pop off of your brain. It will not be like Todd or Karen or Win in that it will have its own personality and name and all that, but there will be a little part of yourself that holds on to this emotional trauma bit. And that's what causes PTSD. And that is classified as primary structural dissociation. A lot of people who have PTSD talk about how they feel very disconnected from the trauma that happens to them, or maybe they just don't remember it at all. And then when they get triggered into a flashback, they switch to the EP, which is not the same as DID switching, but that emotional part that holds the trauma sort of takes over and throws them back into the traumatic moment. That same concept applies to DID systems. And DID with multiple ANPs and multiple EPs is called tertiary structural dissociation. There is also secondary structural dissociation, and that's responsible for things like complex PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and some forms of OSDD, but we're not going to get super into those details right now. You can research that on your own time if you so desire. So tertiary structural dissociation, which is responsible for the multiple personality thing, makes it so alters can be formed at any point in life as long as that initial bonding of the mind didn't happen. Now, because our theoretical person with PTSD that I was talking about earlier was already totally merged together, it took a large trauma in order to make a tiny little EP pop off. With DID, the brain is already used to being in multiple isolated ego states. And so that's just a coping skill for stress for the brain for the rest of that person's life. That's why it's super extra important for systems to have lots of coping mechanisms for stress and coordination for handling big things, because if you don't, your system will probably just continue to grow. And if you're not ready for that, that can be really chaotic. And like I said, this doesn't just happen as a response to trauma after DID is developed. Alters can be formed in response to new responsibilities, like if someone gets a new job and that job is very demanding. An alter may be born specifically to fill the role of working at that job. In our case, we had a very stressful situation with some very toxic family members that Wynn didn't know how to handle. And as a response of her not knowing how to properly handle that, ta-da, Jessica Mann is born to fix that problem for her. Now, she fulfilled her role. We are able to cut out toxic people from our life quite easily now, but we still have this delusional therapist alter who we have to deal with now. Because Jessica doesn't hold any trauma memories whatsoever, to the point where she doesn't even think she's connected to the body's trauma, she would be classified as an apparently normal part. Someone looking at her may not think that she seems apparently normal because she believes that she is a 46-year-old who lives in Texas and somehow manages to turn our face into her face when she looks in the mirror. But according to the theory of structural dissociation, she's an apparently normal part. And that is how she was able to come to be in our adult life, even though we are not currently going through anything even close to something that a person could interpret as trauma. We as a system try very hard to limit stress and pass on responsibilities so that we don't split off and make new alters in this way, but obviously sometimes it cannot be avoided. So we will take this in stride and welcome Jessica into our ranks as soon as we can actually connect with her. I know that this video was kind of dense. There was a lot of sciencey stuff and a lot of vocabulary. I hope that it was okay to follow and that I broke it down in a fairly easy to understand way. Again, if you want to learn more, there's going to be links in the description. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And all you in tropical fish out there, I love you so much, and I hope you all have a super great day. We'll see you next Monday. Bye! Mwah!